Now it's time for the most popular in savory pies, chicken pot pie. And I think mine is pretty special because I finish it with a cheddar biscuit topping. But before I get to that part, let me take care of this filling. So I've got ½ a pound of cremini mushrooms that have been sliced. You want to cook mushrooms over high heat, so I'm preheating my pan, and I'm going to add to it 3 tablespoons of butter. Now, the butter is not just there to cook the mushrooms, it's also going to become the base for my roux. You can watch butter melt within the pan, and you'll see it foam up. Those are the milk solids that will then evaporate. The bubbles are just starting to subside, so I'll add my mushrooms. If you get a little browning at the bottom of the pan, that's okay. I've got some nice color on the mushrooms, which is what I'm after. So I'm ready to add my carrot and onion, basically a medium carrot and a medium onion diced up. I don't want to brown my onions, so I turn down the heat a little bit, and I'm gonna let this cook until the onions soften up and turn translucent. The carrots, of course, at this point are still a little firm, but that's okay. I'm gonna cook them through. But now is the time to add the flour. A roux is a combination of butter and flour, and that lends a thickening power to a simple stock. When I put the flour over the vegetables, it coats the vegetables in a nice even layer. I've got 2½ cups of chicken stock, but I'm not going to add it all at once. I'll start with ½ a cup. That'll loosen up the flour and create the base that then expands the more stock I add. And immediately, you'll see it starts to thicken up. Now I can add about another cup, and I'll bring this stage to a full simmer, and I'll add the remaining stock. Now for a little seasoning, a couple of bay leaves, and I've got 2 teaspoons of chopped fresh thyme. And immediately that aroma transforms. I'm gonna add a touch of salt and a little bit of pepper now. I'll let this simmer for 10 minutes, cooking it until the carrots are tender. The carrots yield easily. I'll pull out my bay leaves so I don't forget about them. And now it's time to add the chicken. I've got 4 cups of cooked diced chicken. And because the chicken is fully cooked, really, I'm adding it at this point just to warm it through. And for a nice pop of color, and because it's traditional, how about some peas? You can use fresh peas if you want, but there's nothing wrong with adding a cupful of frozen peas, and they can go right from the freezer into your pan. Now, just like the tortilla filling, you don't want to work with this warm. I'll set it aside to cool completely to room temperature. But now it's time to get the pot pie rolling, literally. I've made that double crust recipe of the savory pie dough. I'm going to use half to line my pot pie container, which is actually, literally, a pot. You could use a traditional pie plate, but I love having that pie crust at the bottom to hold the chicken filling. Roll it gently. All the way in. I've got lots of space for that delicious chicken filling. And I'll trim off the sides. While my chicken filling still needs time to cool, I can just pop this in the fridge to chill. Topping my chicken pot pie with a lovely piece of pastry would be perfectly tasty, but I'd like to change it up and top it with a cheddar biscuit topping. But guess what? I can make use of the savory pie dough I made. I've got flour with butter and egg and a little liquid worked in, so it can easily be a base for a biscuit. I just need to soften it up and enrich it a little bit. So from a disc, I'm gonna break it into pieces into a mixing bowl. As you're handling the dough, you can really get a sense of that flakiness. I love a biscuit with a bit of flakiness. Now I'll add a ¼ cup of flour to this. I'll just sprinkle it right on top. And then I need to add 2 teaspoons of baking powder. So adding this little bit of flour to the pie dough allows the baking powder to work in a little more evenly. Now that this is in smaller pieces, I can add my 2 cups of grated cheddar. I prefer to use a medium or an old cheddar just for that intensity. But the cheese also adds that additional richness that you want in a biscuit topping. So now it's time to add the liquids. I have 3 tablespoons of milk, and I'll add an egg. Just a little whisk, and I'll add this all at once. And now you just mix it until it comes together. The pie dough will break down a little bit more, and expect it to be a bit of a mess. Now it's time for the final assembly. I'll grab that pot, lined with the pie dough. It's nicely chilled now. And now I have my filling that's cooled to room temperature, so it's ready to go into the pie shell. I just use my hands and place the biscuit topping, big chunky pieces all around the top of the filling. You want to leave a little space here and there so the biscuit topping cooks evenly. Now the pot pie is ready for the oven, which I've preheated to 375. I'll put it in for 30 minutes at that temperature, then I'll turn down the oven to 350 for another 30 minutes. And isn't this just so impressive? I love baking it in a pot like this because you bring it right to the table, pot and all, and serve directly from it. Just scoop right in through that biscuit layer and make sure you cut right through to get that combination of the browned crust and that cheddar biscuit topping. Oh, who doesn't love a chicken pot pie?